perhaps here somewhere in the Fertile Crescent of California, outside of Indio, I believe. Have online with me today, Lakin. He's from
Great, yeah, thanks, Lucas. A lot of heartbreaking news to report from the Borderlands this year, and specifically this month. Border wall builders have just reached Quitobaquito Springs, and they're currently erecting a 30-foot steel and concrete fence, literally just a stone's throw from the sacred oasis where the Atam continually practice ceremonies, continually go to pray. This is one of the most sacred places in the entire Sonoran Desert. It's one of the most environmentally important springs in the entire region. It's this miraculous place where cool, clear spring water bubbles out of the desert hills and down into this pond, which is also home to two endangered species, a pupfish and a turtle that don't live anywhere else in the country. So we're quite literally watching the destruction of a place that is irreplaceable, a place that once it's destroyed, we'll never be able to get back. And there have been sustained demonstrations, mostly led by indigenous folks, trying to stop construction through this sacred site. And right now, as we speak, there is a group of O'odham indigenous, mostly women, down there protesting the desecration of the springs.
Antes to document their ceremonial action there along the border. But can you kind of give me a little bit of feedback, to what you saw from afar, online, and what that was like? Yeah, and for me that was the biggest thing, to see a lot of these park rangers and folks just really be you can tell they didn't want to have to be, violently breaking up these ceremonies and standing in the way of these land defenders. And you could see there's a lot of cognitive dissonance because they're being told to follow these orders and protect this construction, and in that same side they're having to attack the people that are also here to protect the land. So it's an interesting kind of juggle between these two groups. Like, what are we seeing on the ground there today? What have we been seeing online? I know you and I both aren't there. We're in different states, but what are they seeing on the ground there in Arizona, and what type of ceremonies what are people trying to do with these ceremonies? So just describe, are these, I mean, a lot of times, the narrative gets sensationalized and picked up, but are these peaceful? What are these, what really goes on at these ceremonies? Can you kind of like describe it to me for someone who, might not have been there before? And that's a big thing that people don't really understand. It's not just the money and the allocation for the wall. It's actually, looking over every single ruling, every single environmental protection law that we have just to make this happen. I mean, I was driving along the Interstate 8 about, 30 minutes ago and looked over and saw about 50 or 60 miles of wall, from one side of this valley to the other. And it's very it's one of the largest construction things that humankind has ever undertaken, and it's going to be one of the largest objects on the planet, if not the largest. And it's really, I mean, we spoke on this yesterday on the phone, is we're really going to disturb, migratory bird patterns, and these animals as bigger than a mouse are not going to be able to cross these barriers again. You're going to see all sorts of issues with with just local ecosystems. What for you, work at the Center of Biological Diversity, what for you are like some of the biggest concerns about this wall? I mean, for me, just like really struck in to hear how, these larger, bigger migratory animals are going to be threatened. But what for you is something that really is hitting home? Yeah, and just in general, like how is this project different than, think about a traditional highway or traditional fence line? Like there was so little, I mean, for me, looking at out inwardly on this, it just seems like that there was so little considerations given to things like the environment. And so how does this vary, from traditional projects where, you'd have a lot of consultation or you might have had a lot of insight from different groups? Yeah, yeah, and a lot of people will use the concept of ceremonial burial grounds. You know, you wouldn't really see people pull up a highway or use eminent domain to seize a cemetery to build a new structure, and that's what you're seeing down here. These are very these are lands that for hundreds of years have been protected by these indigenous groups, and their ancestors are buried here. These are these hunting grounds they've used for centuries, and we are just very much, in a short-sighted amount of time, just disregarding so much of that. And it really, when you look at how other countries, kind of appropriately look at indigenous rights here in the U.S., it's almost like a big letdown. And I know a lot of my friends who are indigenous activists and who are indigenous and just people of color. They don't necessarily feel like they have the full like they're full class citizens. They feel like they're second class because they don't get the same ability to protect their lands. They don't get the same ability to have an education or all these things. So it's been a lot. Exactly. And yeah, and I think when a lot of people are watching this election right now, they think that maybe Joe Biden or maybe Trump is like it's like these like it's a scale. Which way is it going to go? And there's been so much of this wall already built. And originally, a lot of this border wall was built back in the '90s under Bill Clinton and things. So I don't necessarily think that people are going to get rid of what's already been built. I think that the damage has honestly already been done. Hopefully in the future there'll be some sort of remediation to allow animals to pass through, and there'll be some adaptations on the wall. But as it is right now, I don't really see Joe Biden as coming in to help bring any sort of fix to the situation. I think if anything, he might, if he's elected, he might slow construction or stop construction. But what's already built and the damage has been done to Oregon Pipe and all across the Southwest is there, and it's here to stay. So exactly, and even on the autumn land, the wall is literally splitting the reservation in the middle, and it's causing people to have to like make a lot of changes in their lifestyles. And I live in northern Arizona. It's my home base, and just thinking about some of the struggles that the indigenous Dene people have to deal with water and with access to food and all these different issues, it really starts to put things in scale when you go all across the country and see that many of these communities are suffering from still in the year 2020, having their own sovereignty, having their own ability to make their decisions when it comes to their environment, and what things they want to hold for the future. And like I said, as much as I try to keep politics out of it, I just see on like the economic side of this and the long term side of it, this wall is very short sighted, and I really just hope that it's not going to have the effects that so many scientists and people like you yourself are predicting, because we don't want to see these massive die-offs. We need to have biological diversity to have these really enriched environments, and if we don't protect our species of all types, then we're going to end up in a very tight spot. So
archaeological sites, the grave sites that are being blasted and bulldozed. We will never, ever get those back. They're gone forever. And I think, the U.S. government is gonna owe an incalculable debt to the O'odham, to the other tribal nations that have had these sacred sites destroyed. I think we need to have a very frank conversation about reparations for border tribes and border communities. And hopefully that'll take place sooner rather than later. Yeah, so in Arizona, we're on the brink of this incredible comeback. We have jaguars coming back into Arizona from Sonora, recolonizing our Sky Island mountain ranges for the first time in almost 50 years. We've documented 7 different jaguars in Arizona. And right now, today, the Department of Homeland Security is dynamiting these Sky Island corridors and building a wall across the key migratory routes for jaguars to come back into Arizona. If these walls go up, which it looks like they're going to, that's the end of jaguar recovery in the United States. So that's a huge deal. We're also extremely concerned about species that people wouldn't generally think about when it comes to the wall and when it comes to the Sonoran Desert. The Department of Homeland Security is pumping hundreds of millions of gallons of groundwater out of these fragile aquifers in order to mix concrete for the border wall. And that's because they don't want to truck in all that water, and because the wall requires so much concrete and so much water. This activity would be illegal if any of the environmental laws were in place. But because they've been waived, the administration has a blank check to do as much damage as possible in order to cut down on the costs of the wall and make even more money for these contractors. So because these groundwater aquifers are being depleted, we're seeing 4 different endangered fish pushed to the brink of extinction. The Fish and Wildlife Service has called border wall construction the single biggest threat to endangered species in the Southwest. That's coming from government sources, from agency scientists who are saying that. So these people aren't activists. It's horrific. And we're in this crazy situation where the first species that could be driven extinct by the border wall are endangered desert fish and desert turtles. And like, it's so heartbreaking. It's so confusing. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. Um, it's just been such a horrific year for us here in Arizona. Yeah. Yep. Mhm. Yeah, completely agreed. Yeah, I was just curious to hear a little bit more about your trip yesterday. I know, the Park Service has closed off all access to Quitobaquito in order to tamp down on indigenous protests and also to stop the media from documenting all the damage they're inflicting on the sacred spring. I know you had to cross the border and hail a taxi just to get to this remote part of Highway 2 in order to film what's happening. And without you having done that, none of us would have even known that the wall was going up there today, which was, exactly why the Park Service closed the area. So yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about your trip and what you saw. Hmm. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, huge amount of appreciation are on our end, and I think from people across the country that you were able to make it there. And it's just such an injustice that the Park Service is cracking down on people being able to document this. So I just want to thank you for that. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Agreed. Cool. Well, thank you. Yeah, yeah. Let's stay in touch. Sounds good. Appreciate it. Thanks for making the time. Likewise.